All right, and we're recording. My name is Vicki. I'm here with Erin and whoever else shows up during this session, and we're going to take a look at two chapters in Design Basics. We'll record them separately with a little bit of time in between for any questions. So I'll start off with design process. I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and share my screen. And get this going. Erin, if you have not already been in this week's module and on the design page recently, you'll see that at the very bottom, I have posted links to this PDF and the Chapter 2 PDF. So if you want to follow along or if you want to download those as a reference, you can. Okay, so one thing I love about our book is that it talks about design in a really positive way. It makes anyone who studies art or does art feel very empowered, because art and design are just about the opposite, as opposite of you as you can get of chaos. So to design means to plan and to organize. Design is inherent in everything from painting to sculpture, photography, computer graphics, animation, 3D crafts, and disciplines like architecture. It just, the list is endless. So when we talk about design in this class, we're going to talk about how you plan or organize the projects that you're going to create using Photoshop. All art involves design, and design is used in all art disciplines. You can see a little clip from one of the posters in the book. This poster typography and the way that type is arranged is as important and carries the message just as much as the words themselves. It's the opposite of chance, and all artists or designers use the arrangement of elements to form a visual pattern in order to communicate something. Another poster that our book uses is this one by Steve Mahalo. And you can see here that it's composed to communicate a really simple and unambiguous statement. The designer has given the word war a special focus with the color red, but the message is primarily verbal, not visual. You can think of it as this quote: art seeks visual solutions to problems. We are looking most of the time as designers, and most of the time using Photoshop, we are looking for a way to communicate something. You'll find in our class that most of the projects have something to do with visually communicating a specific concept. We use our design skills to solve problems. How can this company communicate this message, or that they are the best at what they do? Sometimes we'll use visual representation. Sometimes we might use a play on words. There aren't any rules in art. Actually, there are rules in art, and you learn them so that you can break them. So the creative fields are so wonderful because there aren't any predetermined correct answers. Every designer comes up or team of designers comes up with their own answer to the problem. That's why you can see so many ways to sell chicken noodle soup. If you go to the grocery store and you check out all the labels and you look at the commercials or ads for chicken noodle soup, you'll see that there are many different ways to solve that problem and communicate that message. We have guidelines that we follow. Those are the rules. And these practices, these design principles and elements, actually the principles, have been developed from seeing what works. So, and the more that you start to look at art during this class, art and design, it can be commercial design, it can be fine art, you'll start to see where the design principles and elements have been used in their work. So right now we're kind of starting out with principles. Unity is a principle of art and design, but later on we'll get to the elements like line and color. And so as we go through these chapters, make sure you're looking, even if you're just flipping through a magazine, and try to see if you can find examples of whatever this week's topic is. You can also look at what is not successful. You can, for example, we're going to talk about unity, and you can also look for examples of ads or design where the artist has not been very successful at unifying. You'll see a lot of that on the internet, actually. When we talk about art, we like to distinguish between content and form. So the subject matter or the story or the information that the artist is trying to communicate is the content. So whatever you're trying to say is content. The visual aspect, how it looks and how you put together the elements and principles of design, is the form of the art. So how you are saying it. Those are important distinctions to keep in mind. When a piece is created not with a message, then it's said to be just created for aesthetic purposes. So oftentimes jewelry is not designed to communicate a message, it just looks good. Same can go for other things. You can look around and probably in your home see things that have been designed strictly for the purpose of looking good. But in our field, in digital media, most of the time, art is a form of visual communication. The reason we are so visual and the reason that Photoshop is so important in communicating these days on the web, even for printed material, is because we are a visual species. You've no doubt heard that a picture's worth 1,000 words. We can communicate with images and compositions in ways that cross cultural divides, across geographical boundaries, cross language. So it's important to run your designs, especially if you are working in advertising or marketing, past a lot of different people to see how clearly your design is getting interpreted or read. Most of the time, we're trying to say something, and a successful design communicates an idea or a concept. You can use so many different methods to express your ideas or feelings. As you'll see, a lot of the elements that we'll study, color, shapes, line, are expressive and can help you express your idea or a concept or an emotion. And symbols are a great way to communicate theme or message. And oftentimes words are combined with a visual to strengthen the message. However, this poster that's illustrated on the right doesn't even need any words. It's helpful to understand who created the poster. And when you look down below, you see that it's a poster for Amnesty International. And then most people go, aha, I understand what this author or what this designer is saying to me with this poster. Let me see if I can tell you anything else about that. Oh, sorry. So there is a caption in your book underneath this poster. So if you don't have the book, it is written in German, but you don't have to understand the German to understand that message is about pain and suffering and torture. So the creative process is often broken down into 3 steps: thinking, looking, and doing. They don't have to be in that order. They can happen in any order or at any time. Often you'll hear artists when you watch a video, like if you're subscribed to MindTap, the DesignBasics MindTap course online has some artist videos. And in those artist videos, the artist talks about how inspiration arrives, how they might be doing something completely different, and the idea or the creative thought to do something a certain way will appear. Many artists will walk and not even consciously think about their designs or their art, but the creative process will be working inside of them as they walk. Louis Pasteur said that chance favors the prepared mind. So when you think about getting started on a project, any kind of creative project, you may want to first think about the problem. And this is oftentimes what creative teams will do when they get together with a new account or a new project, and they'll sit down and they'll start outlining what is to be achieved here. Is there a specific visual effect that is desired? Are there stylistic requirements? Is it to be very illustrative, very photorealist? Is it supposed to be an abstract piece of art? So on. What are the physical limitations of the piece? What are the sizes of it? What are the colors of your client, or colors that might help convey the message? What is the media that we're going to use? Is it paper? Is it the web? And when is the solution needed? Because if you are like me, deadlines are a really important part of the design process, because we work best, creative people work best with deadlines, and often up to the deadlines. Then you might think about the solution. So you've identified the problem that you're trying to solve with your design or your art. And now you can think about how different ways that you can solve that problem. You might make a list of images or symbols that could represent the theme or the idea. You could quickly sketch them. Many artists, even if you don't think of yourself as an artist, many designers Use thumbnails. You might divide your paper up into 12 or 16 squares and just start scribbling some physical representation of these ideas that come to your mind. You can expand that list by talking to other artists. You might do a little research on how other people have conveyed the same message or illustrated the same idea. Not that you're going to copy them, but you may get some ideas, and the more you inform your mind, the better your solution will be. Once you've got a nice list of ideas, you might want to narrow that down to the best ones. And then you can ask yourself how you're going to use or show the image in a unique or original way, your own personal original way to convey that idea. It sounds overwhelming, but it's actually not. So here's an example of this is from the School of Visual Arts in New York, and they wanted to, make an unusual poster that conveyed the idea of creativity. I'm going to read to you what the book says about this poster. The name of this is Having Talent Isn't Worth Much Unless You Know What to Do with It. And what the artist has done is taken a fragment of a pencil and created that, twisted it into an unusual form to kind of reiterate the text up above. So it gets your attention and is unique and something that you won't just walk quickly by if you saw this up on a bulletin board. So this is a successful visual answer to a creative problem of advertising for this School of Visual Arts. Third, you want to think about the audience. So how you decide on your imagery might depend on the target audience for your message or idea. So if you understand who's going to see your design and how they're going to see it, are they going to see it in the physical world, or are they going to see it in the digital world? The more you can know about the target audience, the better you'll be able to match the message to the receiver. It's a lot like marketing. So a lot of times if you are in advertising or marketing and you're creating these visual representations of a message from your client, you'll put together a target audience profile, and that will help you zero in on them. When we think about design, we look at form and content. So again, content is the message you are relaying. Form is the visual representation of that. You'll think about how is it going to be presented, what is going to be presented, and how can I go through revision and change. One of the things that I often see in this class with projects is that a student will have an idea and they'll post their draft idea, and then if it's not quite working, they sometimes have a hard time with going back to it and revising it. But over here in this example, the original logo for the Greyhound Bus Company, we can see how that artist came up with a concept, and because the original was a little bit clunky, doesn't really look speedy, You know, we can tell that it's running, but it's kind of muscular and heavy looking. That artist went back and redesigned that logo probably many times, and probably continues to redesign it to make it sleeker, faster, and a better representation for what the Greyhound Bus Company wanted you, the consumer, to think when you saw that design. You can look around your house and you can see things that have been around for years, like Coca-Cola. You can see how their logo has changed or been refined over the years. A lot of times this refinement keeps a logo fresh as generations change, but they don't lose the essence of the logo, so that you can immediately still tell what that logo stands for. So as designers on the web using Photoshop, we often are asked to design icons. These are also called pictograms. And these are very simple designs that don't require words and are used to encourage the viewer to press a button or link to something else. So you can see some very simple icon designs here. And we do this often with Photoshop. I believe, honestly, I'm not sure if I have an icon assignment this summer or not, but I'll go and check. When you're thinking about design, you also want to think about form and function. So purpose designs the look and shape of an object, and the efficiency should be obvious. And this is most obvious in terms of utilitarian use. So if you are, say we're designing a new plastic fork, the purpose of that fork is to stab food and pick it up and convey it to a mouth. So even though you might be able to tweak the design a little bit of that fork, and I'm sure you've seen like camping sporks and things like that, you need to remember that there is a function that is important for that object to continue to be able to perform. The fork can't completely morph into something else. An example of this from our book is the post-World War II utility and rescue amphibian. And the designer of this kind of looked to other things that work in the environment in which this vessel was supposed to work, the ocean, in his design of it. So you can see the some similarities between the whale and the albatross. So that was all the thinking part, about thinking about your problem and your creative solution to that. Then you want to be looking. You want to look at all the different ways that you might be able to visually solve your problem. So you can look to nature, you can look to artifacts, other artists, prehistoric art. You can look to modern culture. You can look to history. And here are some examples of ways that designers and artists have used those things in their particular art. The lamps obviously have a very leafy look to them and have come from that, the way that that artist looks at the world, and thought she might be able to recreate those veins and spaces into something that could be very decorative and allow light. You want to differentiate between the source and the subject. So the source is the stimulus of the idea or the image, and it's often found in nature. There's some examples of that would be bones that look like sculpture, animals that are used as a basis of form, and then the subject is the content of the work or the way that the artist saw the object. So the source and the subject. Lots of either ors. Some of the things that you hear a lot about in design are to look again. So look and look again and look some more, and then come back the next day and look even more closely or at something else and find the relationships. So if you are thinking about, let's see, let's go back to that amphibian. You were thinking about, okay, how am I going to design this vessel that can go underwater? Maybe I'll look at fish. Not quite the same, because this is also something that's going to require something from the air, and so a fish doesn't quite fit the bill. But what else involves both air and water? Oh, it might be a dolphin or a whale. So you start to just look at things that might be able to inform your design, and what are the relationships between them. An awareness of the power of familiar images is fundamental to understanding. So if I show you a picture of a chair, you immediately understand what that chair is for. And as a designer, if you were trying to convey some kind of message about sitting or resting, not moving, or just any number of things have to do with resting in a chair, something about the chair would be important for you to note and analyze and perhaps use. And looking can be very influenced by mass media images. We know this. We live in an Instagram world. We live in a Facebook world. We live in an advertisement world. So we know how much influence is carried and conveyed by mass media. Sometimes an image has been reproduced so many times that it becomes immediately recognizable. It becomes part of our visual vernacular. And once an image has become a part of that, and I'm sure you can think of, I'm thinking of, I can't think of the name of it, but the very iconic farmer and his wife standing in front of the barn with the pitchfork. That is part of our, especially American, visual vernacular. Here's another one. This is a play on an iconic image. So in this image, the artist has taken Washington crossing the Delaware and changed it to George Washington Carver crossing the Delaware. He's changed all of this from George Washington, the president, crossing the Delaware and the message that that carried, to this message about race and assumptions and all kinds of other cultural messages. But because it's so, that on first glance is so much a part of our vernacular, we immediately get some of what the artist is trying to convey. And then as we look at it and start to look at it more deeply, we start to pick up on some of the subtleties. And again, let's see if I can, if you don't have your book, let me see if I can find anything that they don't want us to miss about that. So in a painting like Washington crossing the Delaware, the image is almost as universally recognized as a religious icon. And there's a long tradition of artists paying homage to the masters, and we can understand how an artist might study Washington crossing the Delaware in an attempt to learn techniques. But in George Washington Carver Crossing the Delaware by Robert Colescott, he has struck a different relationship. He plays with the familiarity of the patriotic image and startles us with a presentation of negative Black stereotypes. One American stereotype is laid on top of another, leading the viewer to confront preconceptions about both. And that's right from Design Basics. Then we come to doing. So we've gone thinking, looking, and doing. So we start thinking about the materials that we might use. 2 points of view from other artists. Materials are lifeless until they're given shape by a creator, and materials by their own potential can create their end. This first, Eva Hess is an artist who unfortunately died early, young, but she is well known for her contradictions, and the studio view of her work shows a number of her sculptural works. She gave shape to, she used paper mache, cloth, and wood, and to convey her messages. And you might be interested in looking at more of her work and seeing up close how she did that. And then Sarah Weinstock's works with, her work is a drawing, and it is born out of ink that's been spread on soap bubbles, and then the artist coaxing and encouraging those materials on the paper, and then the result being that it looks like two organic forms reaching, with one reaching out to the other. So this is all just like supposed to kind of start your creative juices going. Like, how can you use materials in a way that will help you convey your message? You can do all this from trial and error. You'll develop your own intuition, or you can use the application of a system. And the sculptor that actually created the huge metal sculptures would start oftentimes with ideas from little objects that he would spray paint, that he would arrange and spray paint. And then as he held that up and looked at the design, you know, he could go back and arrange these small little elements and try something else until he got a visual design that he thought both he could create in a large scale metal sculpture and that, you know, looks the way he wants it to look. So this one obviously a little bit off balance, a little bit abstract. As creators, as designers, as artists, there's a lot of doing and redoing. Everybody revises. Oftentimes you have to start over. And so it's really important that as in this class and as an artist, you overcome any attachment to your first idea. And we all do it. We all get attached to our ideas. But revision is what allows that initial idea to grow. And so any artist, there are books and books and books out there of famous artists that will show you the revisions that they've made, the times that they've repeated a certain drawing or painting in order for that to grow. And the example here is Matisse, and a couple of different ways that he has done the nude and how that has evolved over time. And I'm sure if he were alive, he would continue to revise that. Here's another example, more of a commercial type process of revision. So in the very top, you have the development of the idea, and then you see how it is refined over time, moving to the right, and then at the very end, how it becomes the logo. So embrace revision. Then we oftentimes have to embrace critique. And it's a really important part of designing. And in our class, we'll be doing this in the discussion forums. I'll often ask you to post a draft of your project, and then I'll ask you to comment on other people's draft designs. And it can really be constructive. It can help you see ways that your initial idea or your draft can become better. And it's very important to be constructive, to be positive. Not, I like this, I don't like this, so much as I see how you used color, the blues, the cool colors to convey a serene concept, but it's become very monotone, and I think it would be better if you had a little bit of contrast. Something like that, where you're not tearing it down, but you're just adding a little bit of constructive criticism based on design and based on either the principles or the elements of design. So we like to use words like size, emphasis, perspective. We like to use the design words that you'll be using. It's most valid to link the criteria, the critique to the criteria for the artwork. So sometimes people will lose track of what they were supposed to convey. They gotta get caught up in Photoshop and they're having a lot of fun, but that's where your classmates can really bring you back to the original assignment and remind you of the goals and the criteria for a good grade. And then you might also be able to pull in some kind of cultural or historical perspective in order to suggest changes. So here's how a traditional critique, oftentimes works were put up on the board. Obviously ours won't be that way. There's some kind of analysis. Usually I ask students to present their thoughts about their work and how they're going about their project. And then you get a little feedback from the rest of the class about how they are seeing your efforts and how they think you might improve it. Okay, now that I'm going to stop. That concludes our chapter 1, sorry. And I'm going to pause here, stop recording, and then see if you have any questions and move on to the next chapter.